Welcome to another show of New Hampshire Citizens for Progress. Boy, it's been a while. And a lot of stuff going on. Uh, what we're going to deal with right now is the COVID and voting. It's been an issue, people possibly risking their health and safety in order to be able to vote. And Brian here with Open Democracy is really working hard on that you can stay healthy and vote safely. We're not going to know exactly where this virus is at that point in time. It may not be an issue, but then again, it could be. And we don't want anyone sacrificing their life or their health in order to be able to exercise their right to vote. So, can you tell us what's been going on, Brian?
Well, Rick, first of all, I want to say thanks for having me back. It's been a few months, and I was just telling you that I haven't been in Manchester for like 3 months or 4 months, so I'm really glad to be out for a change. And that's what we're here for, right? Is we're doing this for the people. So, like you said, I'm Brian Beihl. I'm Deputy Director of Open Democracy and Open Democracy Action. And Open Democracy is a nonpartisan, non-profit group that's based in Concord, and we do voting rights, we do money and politics things. And the last time I was here, we were talking about LLCs and what an evil scourge they are on campaigns. And now it seems like these days we are entirely about voting, and specifically, we are really concerned that there may be hundreds of thousands of people in New Hampshire that may not come to the polls because they're concerned about COVID-19. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
So, the governor has made several rulings and recommendations, and especially one today. Well, absentee voting, when would I ask to be able to do this?
Well, you can ask anytime, but New Hampshire has one of the strictest absentee voting procedures in the country. Okay, so it's important for people to know. But the good news is that the Secretary of State and the Attorney General of New Hampshire have decided to bend the rules on absentee voting. Okay, so normally there are 4 excuses that New Hampshire demands that you meet in order to get an absentee ballot. Okay, one is I'm not going to be around, I'm not going to be in town, so I need an absentee ballot so I can vote early before the election. Another one is some people can't get off work. You know, hourly workers, they can't get away from work to be able to go and vote during that time. So, and that is a fairly large number of people. Then we have religious observance. So if a religious holiday happens to be occur on that day, you can get an absentee ballot. And then if you are physically disabled and you're not able to come to the polls in person, you can use that excuse to get an absentee ballot. And it's that physical disability that is the key to everything we're going to talk about today, because COVID-19 has freaked a lot of people out, and we're afraid that they're not going to go to the polls. And what the Secretary of State and the Attorney General have said is that you can use this physical disability excuse to request an absentee ballot. Okay? So now, some people are going to say, well, I'm not disabled, right? And I don't feel right, I don't feel good about signing this document that says I'm disabled. It's okay. The Secretary of State and the Attorney General of the state of New Hampshire and the governor, I might add, have all said it's okay for you to sign what's called an affidavit on your absentee ballot request form to say that you're disabled and you're concerned with COVID-19.
So the most important point here is that you don't have to worry about any of those other 4 reasons. You can just decide that you want to vote absentee.
That's right.
And once you decide that, you just really have to know that all you have to do is check that disability part, whether you're disabled or not. It's just you want to register, you want to vote, and you want to be able to do it safely.
Now, it's not just me that I'm worried about, right? So I'm 59, and I would probably be okay if I wore a mask and I went into the polls, okay? But let's say my 96-year-old mother-in-law, who passed away a couple years ago, she were still alive, and I were concerned about her health. If I go to the polls and I pick something up and I bring it home, I'm putting her at risk, right? So it's what we're trying to communicate to people is that it's not just about you, and it is about the other people in your household, people who might have pre-existing conditions, might have immune deficiency problems. Maybe they've got lung or breathing problems that, this could be a death sentence if you brought this home to them. You got to consider about our poll workers. In New Hampshire and around the country, really, a lot of the people who work at the polls are over 60. And so when they have thousands of people coming in to vote, they are going to be exposed thousands of times, potentially, to people who might be carrying the virus and not even know it. So, again, it's not just about you, it's about doing the right thing for your community. And it may take an extra step or two to do this. But in a minute, I'm going to tell you a little bit more of why this is important that we do. You probably want to know how it is that we do this with all this paperwork, right? Because it's a multi-step process that you need to do.
What's the way to go about doing this? Is this something I do on the phone? Is this something that I do online, or can I, if I have a phone with internet service? What other ways that I would go about being able to do this?
Well, there's a few ways. Not as many as in other states, because New Hampshire is back in the 19th century when it comes to absentee voting. And here's a factoid for you: that the first absentee voting that's recorded that in the nation happened out of Hollis, New Hampshire, when a group of Continental soldiers were given permission to send in their ballots by mail. So that's pretty cool. Started here in New Hampshire.
This is nothing new. This has been going on since 1775.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a few steps. So get out your pencils, folks, because you're going to want to make some notes here. And if you don't get everything down, don't worry, because we're going to give you a website in a few minutes that will give you kind of everything you want to know and more about how to vote by absentee ballot. Number one is that you need to request an absentee ballot application. Now, there's a couple ways you can get this, and like you just suggested, Rick, you've got, if you have an internet connection and a computer, you can download a PDF from your city website. So in Manchester, you go into the city clerk's area, and there's a voting and registration tab in the Manchester City website. And if you go there, you're going to see a link for the absentee ballot application -state primary 2020. Okay, so that's one way of getting it, is going there and to download it. So you can do that right now, and I'm going to tell you why you should do it right now in a minute. But that's one way of doing it. You could also go to the Secretary of State's site, which is sos.nh.gov. So you can go there. One of the knocks on the Secretary of State's website, it ain't easy to find things on that website. So you're probably better off with the city of Manchester, to be honest with you. Now, let's say you don't have a computer, right? And you don't have a printer. and you need to get this ballot application. So what you need to do, you can call the Manchester City Clerk's office. You can send them an email, and or you can stop by the Manchester City Clerk's office and ask for.
Well, you can't do that right now. I just called them on the phone, and they're not open to the public at all. So
Okay,
you
good to
have
know.
You have to do it by phone or computer, or even using your phone online.
Okay, so you would then, they would then send that to you through the mail, and you have to specify when you talk to them, hey, I don't have a printer, so I need a printed copy of this sent to me. Okay, and guess what? At the moment, to make it more complicated, there are 2 copies that you should request. And what is your question, Rick?
What are those 2 copies?
So we have 2 elections coming up this fall. We have the September 8th state primary. So this would be for runoff elections for your local state reps, for the governor, office of governor, and we have multiple candidates for governor this year, for the executive council, and for New Hampshire Senate. So all of those, if there's a primary challenge, that's going to be in September. And just a word about that, if you are a registered voter now, if you're a registered Democrat, unfortunately, it's too late for you to change your affiliation. If you wanted to change it and say, I want a Republican ballot in September, or a Republican that says I want a Democratic ballot in September, it's too late for that. But if you are an unaffiliated voter, and I just found out something interesting, Rick, I don't know if you knew this, but the number of unaffiliated voters in New Hampshire is bigger than either the Democratic Party, registered Democrats, or the registered Republicans. There are more unaffiliated voters than either the Democratic group or the Republican group. So those folks can walk into the polling place in September and they can say, I want a Democratic ballot or a Republican ballot, and they can be given at the polls. Okay? All right, so back to
Yeah, we want to keep this as simple as possible.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to get sick. I want to vote. What do I got to do?
Okay, so you're going to download the 2 applications. You need one for September and one for November. And if you download it from the website, it's the same form. It's just got one box that says September and one box that says November. Okay? And on that, and you know, as a matter of fact, I can even show you a picture of this. So we have a graphic to show you what the first page of this form looks like. And you'll note on this graphic that it has a box up at the top, and it has those 4 excuses that we talked about. And I've got a red arrow right by the one that is the disability box. And for this particular form, that's the one you need to check. And again, Secretary of State says it's okay. Attorney General says it's okay. So, and Rick says it's okay too.
Well, it seems like regardless of what the reason is that everybody can check that box so that they can vote and not be worried about it. So it's almost like a default. Well, geez, I've checked that I'm disabled because I want to vote this way.
Exactly. So the affidavit down at you got to fill out the form entirely, give them all the information that they're asking for. And then down at the bottom, there's this thing called an affidavit, and it says, I solemnly swear that I'm telling the truth, nothing but the truth, so help me, and a $2,000 fine in case you are lying through your teeth. But remember, Secretary of State says it's okay, Attorney General says it's okay, so sign that document. It needs to be signed with a pen. I learned a new word the other day when we were talking to the Secretary of State's office because we wanted to know whether you could use an electronic signature. Like, I'm filling this out on my PDF, right? And I put an electronic signature. You can't do that in New Hampshire. You have to have what's called a wet signature. And that would go harken back to the days when you dipped your quill into the ink well and you signed your name, right? So you had a wet signature on your document. So for you folks, you got to sign those 2 documents, one for September, one for November. And then if you want to, you can pack them up and put them in the mail, which is what I'd suggest, back to the Manchester City Clerk's office. Or you can put them in an envelope and drop it off. They probably have a Dropbox. Do they have a Dropbox in Manchester? They probably
We
do.
still have some physical post office boxes at the corners, on the corner of the street that
Okay.
you could actually mail it. But I'm not sure. I would suspect, but I believe they have the city hall closed to the public, and I'm not aware of an exterior drop-off box like you're suggesting.
A lot of towns have them to like do pay your taxes and drop stuff off after hours. So that would be something to look for. But mail, you can't go wrong with the postal service, right? I mean, that would just send it through the postal service. There's one other way you can do it, but it's got some cautions that I have to tell you. So you can fill out that application and sign it with what kind of wet signature, Rick?
Oh, wet
A
signature.
wet signature. And you can then scan that document and put it and attach it to an email and send it in. That is okay with the Secretary of State if you do that, okay? So that's okay, but you just can't put the electronic signature in it.
Yeah, I've had trouble with online documents like this before, because what you have to do is you have to save it onto your computer and then fill it out. And in this case, we're going to have to do at least a printed copy to be able to get the wet signature, scan it back in, and then be able to deal with it that way.
Yeah, it's an extra step, and a lot of people don't have a scanner hanging around. You can take a picture of it. We've also confirmed that.
So I could print it out, fill it out, take my phone, take a picture of it, and attach that.
That is correct. That is correct. And that was news to us because we didn't know you could do that. You could actually text something to the town clerk if they do that, which I don't know that they do in Manchester. But that is a possibility where you can text
Now,
those
this is
documents in.
we're talking about Manchester here, but this is something going on throughout the state. So it's going to be a little different with each city and town?
Well, I'll tell you, the rules are the same as far as the Secretary of State is concerned. And there, as a matter of fact, they just issued some new guidance from the Secretary of State on this that went out to all the clerks for all the towns and cities in New Hampshire. But I will tell you that the local, like how it gets done at the office, like how you get the document in there, can be different from town to town. So, like you said, the drop boxes. Some towns have drop boxes, some towns don't. Some town clerks will ask you to drop it off in person. They're not supposed to do that. You should be able to send them by mail if you want to. Okay? So those are all, different variations. And there is one thing that all of your listeners or your viewers should be aware of, that the Secretary of State is considering streamlining the form. Remember I said 2 forms? And you have to do this disability box. At some point this summer, and we don't know exactly when that's going to be, we're hoping that the Secretary of State does a streamlined form, which you would be able to use one form for both September and November, and it would have a separate box on it that would say concern of COVID-19 or fear of COVID-19 or something like that. Okay? So the reason that I'm telling you about that, but I also want to tell you that you should not wait to do this. I know that is something that everybody asks us. Like, should I do it now? Should I do it closer to the election? So we have a concern that the cities and towns are going to get overwhelmed with the number of absentee ballots. So in Wisconsin, in April, about 70% of all the ballots cast, and you probably saw pictures of what it was like and people in masks and going to vote and everything. But about 70% of all the ballots cast were absentee ballots. And we don't want to. There were 53 positive cases that the last I knew that came out of voting in Wisconsin. We obviously don't want that to happen. But we want to make sure that people do it early because we've seen the numbers be really, really high. My recollection is there's over 60,000 registered voters in the city of Manchester. Now, don't quote me on that, but that I seem to remember that as part of a discussion that I heard happening in Concord. Now, they're expecting that 50% of all ballots cast in the November election, the presidential election, are going to be cast by absentee around the country. And the Secretary of State is anticipating that in New Hampshire. I'm thinking it might be even a little higher than that. But that means that 30,000 absentee ballots would be cast. That means that people have to fill them out. They have to send them back to the clerks. And if you can imagine that if you're the city clerk and it's the late August and you have the September primary coming up and 30,000 pieces of mail come into your office, that you have to then make sure that they get logged into this electronic logging system that the Secretary of State has. And they have to go into a safe place. And then eventually, when it comes to election day, we're going to have to count all those ballots, right? So the numbers are huge. And what we're hoping to do is to take the pressure off by starting to get these absentee ballots in early. So folks, I want to tell you again, start it now. So you should go and request your absentee ballot application right now. You should download it or request it from the clerk, fill it out, and get it back.
Okay, so one of the concerns here is it going to be accurate? Do I have to be worried about whether my vote gets counted or not?
Good question, and there's been a lot of discussion over voting by mail and absentee ballot. Now, New Hampshire's been doing absentee ballots for over 100 years in what the traditional way that we know now, right? And about 10% of all the ballots that are cast on average, in any election in New Hampshire are cast by absentee. So it's not like this is a new thing. It's just that not very many people have used it. So on the accuracy, I mean, the clerks are used to it. And they've been doing this and they've got a process for it. Now they're going to have a lot more ballots than they expect. So there are some logistical issues. But what happens to a ballot when a ballot application comes in, and so Rick sends his absentee ballot application in. The clerk logs it in and says, "I've received this absentee ballot application." And they look at it and they say, "Oh yeah, Rick Maynard is a registered voter in Manchester. Cool." And so they're going to put it in a file of those absentee ballot requests that are for September. And then they're going to have another file that's going to be for November. And every time something happens to that, so they're not going to open that ballot. That ballot's going to, or that application is going to stay where it is. When it comes to about 3-4 weeks before the election, the ballot itself is finalized. And they're going to then put a ballot into the envelope and they're going to send it back to Rick in the mail. And they're going to make a little note. They make a little log entry that they sent that to you. Okay? Rick gets his absentee ballot. He says, "Yeehaw, and I would always recommend this. You get your ballot, you fill it out, and you send it back right away. Now, if you're living local, it's not that big of a deal. But some people live far away, right? Maybe they're doing it overseas, a semester abroad or something, right? And they're going to need more time. So those folks should send it back absolutely as soon as they get it. But if you're local, you got a couple of days, but I'd suggest you sit down, you do your ballot, you put it in the envelope, sign your envelope. There's another little, I solemnly swear that I'm doing this for the right reasons, right? Okay? Secretary of State says it's okay. Attorney General says it's okay. So you sign that envelope, you stick it in the outer envelope, and you send it back to the office through the mail, or you can also drop that absentee ballot off, provided the city clerk is open, which I hope they will be by then. And you can't, interestingly, let anybody else do that for you unless they meet certain qualifications. So if you're doing an absentee ballot, you can't hand it to me and have me drop it off for you. It has to be an immediate family member that does that, and there's some rules and regulations about that. And you can check out our website, and it'll give you the answers to it. But I can't give it to my neighbor and have it bring it back for you. If somebody else brings your ballot, let's say your wife brings it back, she would have to bring ID, and they will log her ID in when they brought that ballot back to make sure that there's no goofiness.
Okay, we want to make sure we get everything covered here.
Mm-hmm.
So we got, when does it arrive? So it's going to arrive 2, 3, 4 weeks before the actual date.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way I can check like the status of it, where it's at?
Yeah, and one of the things that the Secretary of State does have on their website is a voter information portal. It's like 1990s technology, but it's cool and it's secure. So you can go and put your name and your polling place. I don't remember exactly all the information it asks for, but anyway, you're able to look up what your voter affiliation is and what the status of your absentee ballot is. And it'll say, received at Manchester City Clerk on such and such a day, right? So you would know. And then when it's been opened, when they actually count the vote, they'll log it again.
So what if I'm not registered?
Good question, Rick. So just recently, the Secretary of State and the Attorney General have said, yes, you can register to vote by absentee, again, using the COVID-19 disability excuse, okay?
And this is going to cover people that have moved for whatever reason.
Changes in their changes in their voter registration. I just moved recently from the Monadnock region to Northwood. You could do that through absentee, but it has a 5-page form that you'll get. So on the actual absentee ballot request form application, there is a box that says, I'm not registered, send me voter registration materials. And what will happen is the clerk's office will send you a package that has all the documents for you to fill out, but you need to supply a copy of your ID, because we have a voter ID law here in New Hampshire, and you also need to provide your proof of domicile.
Can I change my mind? I've done all this stuff. Mm-hmm. I get the ballot and, I registered. I'm able to vote, whether I moved, didn't move, or I'm a new voter for whatever reason. I've got my ballot. Can I change my mind?
However,
as long as you didn't do that and you wanted to go in person, you didn't already mail it in, you would be able to vote in person if that's what you wanted to do.
That's exactly right. So you could bring your absentee ballot unfilled, and you could bring it out and surrender that when you got to the polling place, when you went in, and just let them know, because they're checking you off as to whether you voted or not, right? And if they see that the absentee ballot has already been counted, Well,
I want to thank everyone for watching this show of New Hampshire Citizens for Progress. I hope you found this information informative, that you're capable of using it. Until we meet next time, be healthy, be safe. Take care. Thank you.